and welcome back to the podcast Awakening Philosophy, where we are, it's early for me right now, a bit red-eyed. It's where we're talking about philosophy, understanding what philosophy is, awakening it in our lives, and using Plato's Parmenides, a text written about his teacher Socrates meeting his teacher Parmenides, as a way of uncovering what exactly philosophy is. And we've seen recently that when we do something like that, if we want to know something, if we want to understand something properly, we don't just talk about what it is, we talk about what it isn't. What if it had non-being? And what would follow for the universe, for us, if philosophy didn't exist? We started talking about that in simple terms of understanding. Hey, we want to know what philosophy is. But also, if our current world doesn't quite understand it, let's figure out why they don't understand it and what they think it is, so we can keep our mind fixed on those objections to true philosophy, so we can be aware of them when they come up, so we don't get duped ourselves, and so we can recognize the true from the false. That's what we've been doing, but recently we've been seeing that that's actually not just a smart way of going, it's a good way of going, because it's also the way of going that we have to follow in the dialectics. That way of thinking is the power of the dialectics, which according to Parmenides is say we must exercise our mind in that kind of a way if we are to reach the truth. And of course we want to reach the truth. That's why we're here. And anything that we want. Don't we want the true thing? Don't we want the truth about it? Don't you want to know the truth about when the concert starts if you're going to the concert? Don't you want to know the truth about where your car is parked if you need to use your car? Likewise, wouldn't you want to know the truth about philosophy and the truth about the things that philosophy addresses? So, looking at what it is and what it isn't, or what if it does exist and what if it doesn't exist, is actually part of the logos. And that was pretty cool to find out. So we've been talking about what philosophy is and isn't, and in doing so we've highlighted that one of the key distinctions between what it is and what it isn't is that philosophy, true philosophy, what we might call nowadays Platonic philosophy, because Plato wrote a lot about it. It's not just Plato, of course, there are a lot of other people. Socrates, though Socrates didn't write. We've got Parmenides, we've got Xenophanes, who are before Plato. After Plato, we have people like Plotinus and Proclus, Damascus. No, not Damascus. I think I have that name wrong. I have to look that one up. There are some other figures who taught at the academy that Plato started and followed in that tradition, that Greek tradition. And what philosophy isn't is where it diverged, where it became different in the tradition of Aristotle and the Latin or Roman tradition philosophers that followed. And that's kind of the tradition we're in today. And so our job is to be able to keep our mind fixed on what it isn't, while following the logos, following a kind of understanding that we're learning how to do about what it is. And specifically, the difference is the what it isn't materialism, isn't relativism. What's materialism? Everything is just made up of physical stuff. The physical world is all that is. And what's relativism? Well, there is no truth. It's all relative to your own opinions and your own beliefs. That's the lower, that's the lesser. We have to keep our mind fixed on that, says Parmenides. Says, hey, these objections, what we have been distinguishing as what philosophy isn't, you have to keep your mind fixed on them if you want to exercise yourself in this kind of a way that can bring you through the logos to grasp truth. Now, what does he mean by grasping truth? Well, that's the other thing he wants us to do. Keep your mind focused on the objections, 1. Number 2, distinguish and define each of the ideas of what? Beings. Beings. So this is the fundamental difference between what philosophy is and isn't. What it is to do with beings. What's being? It's a realm of pure, eternal life, intelligence. It exists prior to our physical world, so we call it metaphysical. But you can also call it the realm of being. What exists there? Beauty, justice, goodness, truth, knowledge. This is the realm of knowledge. So that's what philosophy is really. And how do we get there? Well, keep your mind fixed on the objections. Materialists, all those thoughts that tell you there is no such thing as being or it's unknowable. Number 2, use the logos, use a certain kind of structured, systematic understanding to define and understand the ideas in being. And 3, a triad, is keep in mind that all of these ideas are of the self. So now we have 3 parts in the exercise of the dialectic that we take on as adventuring philosophers on the noblest quest. The quest to know being and know the self. We have 3 aspects being given to us by such a wise teacher, Socrates' teacher. And it also brings to light 3 realms. So now we're getting a view of reality or cosmology. Reality itself has those 3 parts that we're using in the dialectic. There is the physical world. That's the one that's easiest to see with your senses. That's where coffee is. You have the metaphysical, or the realm of being. So you got the world of becoming is the physical. The world of being is the realm of ideas. That's the focus of philosophy. When you apply your understanding to that, that's called dianoia. A Greek word for understanding that refers to the realm of being. And what's the 3rd level of reality? The self. So 3 different basic levels that we're existing in. And being is made up of mind, or ousia. That's something we have to become aware of. Ousia is a Greek term, of course. It means essence or mind. By turning about and knowing itself, it gives itself its own existence. Because it has a kind of existence, but if it's in a non-physical world, it doesn't have its oneness or its selfhood by having a physical body. By definition, it's not in the physical world. Its existence, eternal existence, is through ousia, a kind of integrity and a self-containedness of pure mind. And what's interesting is we, as human beings, have a physical body and we have mind. There is an aspect of mind in the body. And so when we're reading, we hear the Greeks talk about soul. That's when they're referring to, usually when they say soul, they mean our individual soul. So the part of mind that also exists within our physical body. But you could talk about the soul, which is not personal. Or you could talk about the mind. And we have a mind. So we have a body in the world of becoming. We have a mind that has ousia and has a kind of existence in the realm of being, allowing us to be able to grasp those ideas. So long as we take the philosophical journey, the quest, we accept the call to adventure. And finally, we have a self. Now, the language is a bit tricky here, and language is important. Getting clear and precise in our language helps us evolve, helps us see clearer, function better. And the tricky thing here is, we've got a body in becoming, we have a mind in being, but do we have a self? Because if self is the ultimate term, and we're saying we have a self, does that imply that there is something higher that has the thing? If you have a car, you're not your car. It implies there's something greater, you, that has the car. So if we have a self, is that the right way of talking? Because that would imply that there's something else that has this thing we're calling self. What are we calling this other thing? So maybe we won't say have. We could use the word have for now, but we can keep in mind that when we say have a self, we don't really mean have a self. We are a self. At any rate, there's a part of our existence as humans that's in each level of reality, allowing us to ascend or evolve or develop. Learning. This kind of learning, the learning that we used to think of in terms of education, until we diverged off into the Latin tradition. And one of the things that the Latin doesn't have is a precise language themselves. They don't have a word for the. And in philosophy, going from becoming to being, we use the word the a lot. Why? Because we're interested in the beauty and the justice, not a justice, not a example of justice in the world of becoming in the physical, but the justice itself. So we really have to use this word. Without this word, we're going to be limited. Thankfully, we have that word in English. But part of it is not just keeping your mind on the objections, using your understanding and logos to define each of the ideas in being, but keeping in mind that they're all of self, 3 parts. So we need to also add to our English language the key terms that allow for that full transition. Logos. We have words like language and patterns and paradigm and order, but we don't really have a word that puts them all together. So we use the word logos. Logos is a key term that has a high level of existence in that realm of being. Ousia. Don't really have a word for that in English too, so we're going to have to add that one in. Nous. We have a word for mind, but does our idea of mind contain the ability to apprehend those eternal existing ideas? If not, then we've got to add the word nous in there too, to refer to that kind of mind. Understanding. Does our understanding refer specifically to the realm of being? If not, we've got to come up with another word. Dianoia. So we're developing a new language as we go. That makes our seeing more precise. So now that Parmenides has helped us define what philosophy is, helps us see what it isn't, Socrates has shown the difficulties that you'll face if you only think in the world of becoming, if you think that all ideas like beauty and justice and goodness and truth and knowledge, if you think they're all just concepts, just thoughts, you're going to be stuck. So we've seen that. Thankfully, Socrates has gone through it, what we have likely gone through a lot of our and most of our lives. But it's up to those of a a valiant and noble desire and pursuit of the Logos with a naturally good disposition to overcome those difficulties, and it's entirely possible to do so. And Parmenides also adds, by the way, even greater admiration will be given to those who, after completing this journey, going on this philosophical quest to know being and self in the highest possible way, then come back to help other adventurers. So that's an interesting thing he's added there. But notice the idea of helping others happens after we've completed our journey. However, it is a quest that we go on with our friends. There are other people interested in philosophy. There are other people interested in truth and development. Part of the journey is Logos, sharing your understanding, sharing your language, sharing your insights. That's the purpose of this channel and this podcast. To share our understanding, share our reflection, read together as a kind of adventuring group party on the noblest of all of the quests, the philosophical quest. Now that we had that laid out and we've seen it in the text, this isn't just human opinion. This is something that has been shown through reasoned reflection from someone who themselves has completed this journey, apprehended truth, and come back to help us, Parmenides. And using the logic that we've seen, we should be giving greater admiration to Parmenides for doing that for us. Now that we've seen it and understood it, or at least continue to puzzle about it, Socrates then asks, well, how exactly do I do that? I'm up for the task. I want to take on this task, this quest. I want to live a meaningful life. How do I do it? Well, we've already said that there's a process of using the Logos to define each one of the ideas while keeping aware that they're of self, and also keeping aware of any objections. And that's the use of the power of the dialectics, or the use of dianoia. But how exactly do we do it? Now he's given us a puzzle to solve. He's just explained all this stuff in this crazy ancient Greek language.
Wow.
That we have to unpack to figure out what exactly is the structure that we're following here. How do we do it? And that's what we did last time. He gave us 4 different exercises. And he said, this is what you have to do if you want to awaken the mind to grasp truth. And we took notes, and it took a while. We were puzzled and we got stuck, and that's part of the whole thing. Being okay with not knowing, recognizing when you're puzzled, recognizing when you're stuck, recognizing that being puzzled and stuck is actually a high philosophical state of mind, so long as you're in the Logos and you're okay with that, and you recognize being puzzled is part of having a question. We got puzzled, we got stuck, we had to come up with a hypothesis. What is a likely account of what he's saying? How do we use the highest understanding we have so far to make sense of what he's doing? And of course, as we grow and we have more experience and we read more texts and we get more ideas, we're going to have better understanding that we can apply to solving puzzles. This is where we are so far. So we used where we are so far in our Logos and dianoia to make a hypothesis to make sense of the text as close as we can to the text itself, to unpack what are the 4 exercises we are now to do. So let's look at that in the text. Let's jump in. This is where we started. We noticed that there was a certain triad in our thinking, in Parmenides' thinking. He described to us The being of philosophy. This is what it is. This is existence. It's to do with the realm of being, ideas, and self. He explained the power of philosophy. He called it the power of dialectics. And then he asked Socrates, now that you know these two, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in relation to philosophy? So the being, philosophy, the power, dialectics, the activity. What are you going to do, Socrates? And what does Socrates say? So I don't have any clue at all.
What in the heck are we talking about here?
That's what Socrates said. And so Parmenides jumped in as a good, wise teacher and helped us out. He said, this is what you can do if you're interested in the truth. Number 1, use everything that you've learned so far and you will continue to learn about beings and the one or the self. 3 levels. So we talked about becoming and being and the one, or becoming, being, and the self. Kind of loosely using self or one for that highest level of reality. But use everything that you've learned about that as you go to talk about the many beings. So create a logos, create a dialectic. If the many beings exist, how will they relate to itself? So write a paragraph explaining the beings themselves, if they do have being, if they exist in the way we've been talking about. Talk about how they relate to their cause, the one. And then in this essay, this what if the many beings exist, write about what happens to the one itself and how the one relates to those beings. That's your story, that's your essay. Using as your own as high an understanding and a vision as you currently have. And of course, you can keep returning back to it and improving on it and developing it. And if you want, you can even represent each of those ideas and their relationships in relation to. So on this side, we have things. And in the middle, we have relationships. There are only 2 things in the world, things and relationships. This is a simple, precise, sufficient, clear, succinct way of using our thinking about things and ideas to fully grasp a topic you want to fully understand. What do we want to fully understand? Beings. That's what we're after. Why? Because it opens our mind to be able to grasp them directly, know them. And when we know them, we have this understanding in our back pocket, so we're not going to get freaked out. We might even be able to go further using our understanding into that experience. We can use it, we can integrate it to live happier lives. We become more wiser in our lives, more aware, more capable. So we want to understand this. How do we do it? These 4 categories, and we recognized 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a pattern here. The subject, or the selfhood of the subject, in relation to itself, you're talking about itself. The subject in relation to some other thing. What other thing do you want to compare it to understand it? What's one of the things that beings relate to most significantly? How about the one? How about its cause? So as you learn about beings and the one, you can get better at writing the story. How does the one relate to itself if the many beings exist? What can you say about the one itself? And how does it relate? How does the one then relate to beings if beings have an eternal kind of existence? So these are the 4 categories. and then create a what if. What if a universe exists where they do not exist? Do the same thing. Many self to self, self to others, others to itself, and others back to the subject. We have those here. That's what we have to do. Simple enough. The more we learn about the realm of being and the realm of the one or the self, we can make an essay comparing those two realms. And for fun, for communication, or to remember it better, we can create a story about it. Or if you're an artist, create a song about it, or a painting about it, or a novel about it. By taking those things on this side and turning them into a character. And this side, make him a character too. And then you can make a story in your narrative or your art or your song about how they relate to each other. This use of... So if you apply this to your art, you'll be using your art in the highest way. The word for that is anagogic. You'll be using it anagogically, which means to apply it to the highest kind of analogy, which is a really cool, fun word.
Wow.
You love that word.
Wow.
The name for that is mythology. To apply the metaphysical terms that we're looking at, the philosophical terms, and their relationships into a story with characters and a narrative or story to explain how they relate to each other. That's mythology. For example, one day Zeus met Aphrodite in his garden and gave her a high five. Now for you could be using Zeus to represent knowledge, Aphrodite to represent the beautiful, beauty itself. High five could represent the way that they connect in some way, how they relate to each other. You might have a better story than that, but that's the idea. So that's our first exercise. Fun.
Wow.
Second exercise, pick out one of the particular ideas. Parmenides says go for likeness first. Don't quite know yet why, but maybe in doing the exercise we'll recognize the significance of likeness itself. So pick out likeness. Talk about how likeness relates to itself, if it exists, how it relates to another. Now, all others. How does likeness relate to all of the beings? What kind of existence would being have if it had likeness? If one of the aspects of pure being is likeness. And then you have to do the same thing for if likeness doesn't exist. What kind of a metaphysical existence? What kind of an ultimate realm of being? Not ultimate, higher realm of being would it be if it can't have the quality of likeness? It helps you refine both an understanding of a particular idea of likeness and your understanding of the realm of being itself. We're interested in both. We're really interested in the realm of being. So again, subject to itself, to all others or other beings, how the beings then relate within itself, if likeness exists, and then how it relates back to the particular idea of likeness. Same pattern. Self, 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 other, 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 other self. That's our 4 skill tree, and this is our 2 skill tree does and does not exist. And we're rolling. Again, the more you know about being and the more you know about likeness, as you learn, the better you'll be able to go back and improve that, add more qualities that are significant. Third activity, exercise, that we want to do in relation to philosophy. If these ideas exist, these 5, start with these 5 and then any other one that you learn about. But here's a more in-depth exercise than you did for likeness. If it exists, we pick out one. If generation has a pure existence, what follows for the dots means what happens, what results. For generation itself, what kind of a thing would it be if it exists? How does it then relate to a particular other? Pick out an idea you like. You could pick out, how does generation relate to knowledge? You could say, well, that means that knowledge can constantly generate upon itself, turn on itself, and know itself without the idea of generation. Well, without would be in your second essay. If it does not exist, you could talk about, well, if generation didn't exist as an idea, then this particular one, knowledge, couldn't know itself, maybe. You could make that argument. Whereas in this positive, if it does exist, how does it relate to knowledge? It makes knowledge able to turn about generationally and know itself. It's important because we want to know knowledge. So we write about it. How does generation relate to all of the beings, not just a particular one? And then how does generation, if it exists, relate to everything, even in our world of becoming? What kind of physical world will we be in if generation exists? Will we be able to grow? Will we be able to learn? Right? And then you'd have to do another essay. What if it does not exist? So you'd have answers like, well, what happens to our world if generation doesn't exist? Well, we wouldn't be able, we'd be stuck. We couldn't learn, we couldn't grow. We'd all be stuck in our ignorance. And what kind of a universe would that be like? It's like a what if universe. If. It's a hypothesis, it's an if. So you have to do all 3 for if it doesn't exist. Generation doesn't exist. Self. How does it relate to knowledge? How does it relate to all the beings? And what kind of a universe would we live in? That's our third exercise. Apply it to these subjects particularly, and anything else you're interested in that you come across, like knowledge. Fourth and final exercise. The other half of that one. For each of these other things, like we had knowledge over here, well, if generation exists, we do it for the other thing, having been affected. So now, if generation exists, and it's been affected in the way that we've talked about in our previous one, how then does knowledge relate to itself? How does knowledge relate to all the beings? How does knowledge relate to everything in our physical world? And then how does knowledge relate back to generation? So we're finishing out the set, number 4. For if it exists and doesn't exist. Well, we had a different other, because we got 3 kinds of others in this. That's what makes this exercise even bigger. Normally you pick out one other. So in number 1, the other we picked out was the one. And so then we talk about how the one relates to itself and back to the subject. Number 2, we picked out another, and the other we picked out. See, a single other was all of the beings together as a whole. But over here, number 3, we have 3 kinds of others. Others. So that second part, how then does the others relate to itself and back to the subject, actually has 3. So it's a bit bigger. So how does knowledge relate to itself? All of the beings, everything. Covering all the bases. And then back to the self. Back to the self of the dialectic, which is generation. So do it for knowledge, but also over here, we had numbers 2 and number 3. Do this thing for all 3 of them. So how would all the beings having been affected by generation, all the beings relate to themselves? How would all the beings relate to all the beings? How would all the beings relate back to knowledge? How would all the beings relate to everything? And how would all the beings relate back to generation? And there's one more to go, number 3. How does everything relate to itself, having been affected by generation? How does everything relate back to the ideas? How does everything relate to knowledge? How does everything relate back to generation? Now this is funny because we've got how does it relate back to itself, but we're in the 3rd category. So here, how does everything relate back to everything is the same as here. So for one of those, you got to substitute for the particular object. So what we could say is this. We could say particular other. So how does everything relate to knowledge? How does everything relate to all the ideas? How does everything relate to itself? That's one way. I like this. I like the first way. How does it relate to itself? Seems like you're defining the subject first. In relation to itself means what can you say about it only? I think it's better to put definition at the start. I'll show you why. So those are our 4 exercises. We start general and we become more specific. We start generally about just the realms. If the realm of beings exist, how does it relate to the realm that caused it? That's the self and other. 2 terms in the dialectic. We got a bit more specific. How does one particular idea relate to all of that realm? It's getting a little bit more specific. Now we're getting really specific. All of the different ideas, how do they relate not just specifically to themselves and to all of the whole realm, but a specific idea as well. Add another one, and then add everything. Even more specific. And then finally, super specific. How do all those others then relate to themselves, the many, everything, and back to the subject 3 times. We start general and get more specific. Fun. So, I was saying, making the first category, how does the subject, like knowledge, relate back to itself, is important because it's definition. Let's explain why. So we've pulled from this, we've inferred, we've hypothesized from this 4 parts of the dialectic. Well, first we have a two-part. Got a 2 part or a duad of if exists and if not exists. And within that, we have 4-part. Quadrant. And we talked about these themselves being their own kind of skill trees. Look for patterns of 2s, look for patterns of 3s. So they're all their own skill trees. Okay, we'll have the trees there. 4-part. Number 1, self to self. Number 2, self to others. Number 3, others to others. Number 4, the other back to the subject of the self. Now, why did I want to start in that 4th exercise by saying, define knowledge itself? So, knowledge back to itself. Well, there's another way that we can, in philosophy, think about these 4 categories. When you're talking about the subject itself, how does it relate in relation to itself? Using our mythology of Spider-Man as an example, how does Spider-Man relate to itself? How does he think about himself being a hero? How does he dress himself in the morning? We can say that we are defining the subject itself. When we talk about how Spider-Man relates to a particular others, pick one. Everyone in New York? Is it an everything other? Is it a particular other? Captain America? You get to pick. It's your dialectic. What we're showing is we are showing how he demonstrates himself. How does Spider-Man demonstrate that functioning? Demonstrate. How does he function or demonstrate his superness? Now, the people of New York here, having been affected, then relate to themselves in a different way now. Maybe they're going to be better citizens. Maybe they're going to be happier. Maybe they're going to feel safer. So we have a whole set of new ideas or new terms that result having been affected for the people of New York. So after the demonstration, after being affected, things happen as a consequence. People are happier. People are safer. People don't say, "Hey, I'm walking here," as much in New York. So what we're doing now is we are dividing out a whole list of new ideas that result. Among the people affected, what are a whole bunch of new ideas? We can call that division in philosophy. This is a new way of understanding the 4 parts of the dialectic that we've discovered. Dividing. dividing into key ideas. Little I. So it might not be, it's not metaphysical ideas, maybe. So now the people of New York, having been affected, having been saved by Spider-Man lots and lots, now they walk around happy and they don't say, hey, I'm walking here. They say things like, hey, here's a pizza for you. Here's a lovely pizza pie. And they're going to be so happy with each other.
Wow.
And now, having lived this way, with these new ideas, the people of New York are then going to relate back to Spider-Man in a certain way now. Are they going to hate him? Are they going to celebrate him? Are they going to create a statue in his honor? Are they going to give him the key to the city? How are they going to then relate back to... Are they going to try and be more like Spider-Man themselves? Are they going to be inspired to be better like him? So now, all of these things can be synthesized together. Synthesized back together. And then the subject can be approached or understood or analyzed in a new way. People of New York can themselves be synthesized and understood in a new way, and we can then apply that to Spider-Man. They can analyze Spider-Man in a new way. They can understand Spider-Man in a new way. So now we have two sets of ways of understanding the same thing. Why do we care? Because this is the dialectics. Which is what? The activity. Our demonstration. The activity or exercise of philosophy. Wow.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Why do we care about that? Because it's what we do to reach the realm of being, to grasp being, and what does Parmenides call it? Truth. So that's why we care about defining it as closely as we can. That's what we're doing, and that's why we're doing it. Now, from this, we have two categories. We could call it SO, self to others, and we can call this one DDAS. DDAS. Now, of course, we've got DDDSA, but that's a bit of a mouthful. So what I like to call it is, we know there are 3 Ds, so we don't have to say DDD. That's crazy. It's not crazy. It's just a mouthful, right?
What in the heck are we talking about here?
We're talking about a bit of a mouthful there. So, we call it DDAS. definition, demonstration, division, analysis, and synthesis. We use 4 letters because it reminds us that there are 4 terms. It's in our quadrad skill tree. So that's just a bit of extra thing because we're at we have done a lot of good work, and we've really unpacked the exercise that we should approach philosophy, that Socrates is being told to approach philosophy, that which will allow us to apprehend truth. Holy crap. What we've discovered is a complete spiritual yoga. There's another. A complete, well, we won't say complete yet because we haven't quite seen why it's complete. Because notice we had objections as well as this dialectics, as well as applying it to the self. So we have a way of mythologizing it into stories, which is helpful, but if we don't have a way of applying our dialectic to our problems also, to our objections, it might not be fair to call it complete yet. What we do have is a intellectual or rational yoga. Because yoga is a word that we use to mean to join with a higher spiritual state of consciousness. That's what we're doing. Only ours is rational and intellectual, meaning we understand what that higher state of consciousness is. We've got a name for it. It's called beings. So it's not scary or mysterious or anything like that. It's just simple. It's clear, obvious. Hey, so obvious that Socrates and his buddies rock up at Parmenides' house and say, "Hey, I want to know about this." It's like, all right, come on in. Yeah, you're a smart kid. You seem to be genuinely interested in the logos. Yeah, come on in. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about what's simple and obvious. It's obvious that you don't recognize the realm of being. You're still in the idea of concepts in the physical world. It's okay, you just do this. Simple. So what are we doing? We're making rational, making simple, making clear, making obvious. A method through which we can reach the spiritual, or you don't even have to call it spiritual. We call it spiritual because it's seen through the spirit and not the physical. You can just call it being, or nous, or mind, or ousia, or that which is true. Up to you. Pick all of them and do a dialectic on it. Why not? So we have an intellectual or rational yoga. There's actually a name for this in the Indian tradition. They call it a Jnani yoga. That's a cool name too. You can call it that. So, we're highlighting 2 ways of understanding and grasping what we've just unpacked. Isn't this cool? I think it's fantastic.
Wow. 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 Wow.
I think it's really, really cool. I mean, I think it's rad. So that's why I said in here, in number 4, remember how we have in 3, we have 3 others, a particular other. I read out. We have a particular other. How does generation relate to knowledge? we have all of the others, all of the beings, and then all of the things. And then in 4, we do the last half. How does the particular thing, knowledge, relate to itself? How does the particular knowledge relate to all of the ideas? How does the particular knowledge relate to everything? And how does the particular knowledge relate back to the subject, which was generation? We do it again for many. How does many relate back to itself? How does many relate back to many? We're doubled up. So should we make the first one, how does the many relate to the particular other? Or other one? And then other two, and then other three, and then back to the self? That's one way of doing it. But I like it this way, where you put how does the many relate back to itself first, and then just change that other two for other one. Because we've already got other two up here. And then how does the many relate to everything, and then how does the many relate back to the subject? And likewise for number 3, how does everything relate to itself? How does everything relate to all of the ideas? How does everything relate to everything? Doubling up again. Other 3 and other 3. What do? We could make this other 1, other 2, other 3. Or we could take this as other 2, and instead of other 3, we can take the particular and put it here. So substitute other 3 for other 1, which was knowledge. So how does everything relate to itself? How does everything relate to all beings? How does everything relate to knowledge, the particular? And then how does everything relate back to the subject? And I said, I like this better. And the reason why is because that first category, how does it relate to itself, is you're defining the thing itself that you're focusing on. So in this instance, we're interested in everything. We want to understand everything. We want to understand everything. Isn't that cool?
Wow.
So the first thing is everything in relation to itself. We're defining the thing. Definition. And then we're doing the divisions and then synthesizing it back to the subject. Using all this, we analyze it together. Given all these ways of relating, we synthesize it and we analyze it back to the subject. To analyze the subject back in a new way. So we've got first category is definition. And then finishing with analysis, synthesis. That's why I said I wanted to keep the first line cells, because it keeps with our structure of DDAS. Self to self is definition. Start by defining the thing. Let's give an example. Let's say you run into someone who's never seen a bike.
What?
Yeah. He looks at your bike and he says,
What?
and you say, well, it's my bike. And he says,
Wow.
He says, well. You go, what is this bike?
What?
You can start by defining it however you want. You talk about its parts, maybe. You talk about who made it. Oh, it's this thing made by this bike maker and it's got a wheel and a handlebar. 2 wheels and a handlebar. Defining it first. But are you really explaining a bike and you're not showing how it functions, how it demonstrates itself? Oh, so it's got these parts and it's made by a bike maker. But it moves forward. It takes you places. You can use it to go places. Now you're really explaining what a bike is. Leave that out, you're not really understanding what a bike is. You're not explaining it well. But you're not finished yet. You can use it to get places, but also how do you relate to others and the world with a bike now? Oh, now, and when you got a bike, you can get to places easier. You can hang out with your friends, and you can save time going to the store, because you're getting to it quicker. You can join a BMX club and have fun with your friends. Others, you being affected, how can you relate to others? You can join a BMX club, and it's really cool. And then finally, how do you, so the dialectic is bike and you, 2 key terms to explain a bike. Define the bike itself. It's got a wheel and handlebars and comes from a bike shop. How does it function? Demonstration. Oh, it takes you places quicker. Gets you to the store and stuff. Having got a bike, how do you then relate to the world? Oh, it makes you a happier person because you can join a BMX club and it's super rad. And finally, how do you then relate back to your bike? And because you love the bike and it takes you to the store and you get to play with your friends at the BMX club, you want to take care of your bike and you got to clean it and you got to change you got to make sure that the tires are inflated and you got to grease the chain and you've got to tighten the handlebars every few weeks.
Wow.
And your friend will say,
Wow.
yeah, because he's understood what a bike is. If you leave any of those out, have you really completely explained it? Have you completely understood it? If you leave any of those out, you'll be lacking, right? You probably want to know all of those things. So you can take this with you in your world whenever you're interested in something. Let's say you want to buy a bike. You can say to the bike salesman, I want to know this. Tell me about this bike. Tell me about how I can use this bike. Tell me about how it'll make my life better in my world. Will I be able to go to the BMX track with my friends? Is it that kind of bike, or does it not meet regulations? And also, how do I take care of the bike? You can take this skill set, the skill tree, this way of seeing through the logos in your understanding everywhere with you. You have leveled up. You can use it to buy the best bike, to deal with salesmen. It's in your thinking now, if you exercise yourself in this way. And if anyone asks you about bikes, you can say, oh, a bike is this. It has this parts from a bike shop. You use it to get to the store and get places quicker. It's really fun. This one is a particular BMX bike, so you can actually join the BMX club and meet a lot of cool friends. And you got to make sure you change the tires every now and again and grease the wheels, grease the train. Wow, you've really understood a bike. You're a bike master. Have my amazing money. They probably won't say that. They won't give you, unless you work at a bike store, they might give you their money then. But you can take it with you, you can see through it. And now, why is that interesting? Well, it doesn't just affect everything. It doesn't just affect everything, your everyday life, how you relate to the bike salesman, how you explain bikes to your friends. We can apply this to what's most significant to us as philosophers, which is what? Grasping being. Truth. We want to grasp the idea of truth or knowledge or wisdom or beauty or justice. We want to know these things. So now, you could say, we have ourselves an idea of dialectics. So we could say, if dialectics exist, what is it? Define it. Not a bike anymore, but define what dialectics is. We can use those lists. How does it demonstrate itself? How does it relate to a specific others? What others do you want to pick? Pick a one in particular. How does it relate to your ability to know truth. Actually, you do this. We've got enough. It's not homework. It's an exercise. Think about it. Given what you've learned so far about dialectics, number one, define it. What's its cause and its parts? Use those two categories if you want that we talked about before. SO and DDAS. Pick something you're interested in, let's say truth. How does dialectics relate to truth? How does it relate to truth?
Wow.
How does dialectics relate to all of the ideas, not just truth, but how does dialectics help you relate to all of the ideas in the realm of being? And having dialectics in your back pocket, how does it relate to everything, even bikes and BMX clubs? So that's the exercise if you want to take it. Share it with me in the chat or in the email or however. Do a dialectics on the dialectic. Wow.
Wow. Wow.
And we can now. We have that ability now. We are leveling up. So, we've done a lot of work. We have what we need in our back pocket. We have our mightiest weapon. We have the great sword of ultimate truth. The sword of 1,000 truths. I'm going to take a quick break to have some coffee. I'll be right back. And let's get back into the text. Let's see where we go with Parmenides. Let's see where he takes us. Let's see where the great wise Gandalf takes the budding new adventurers in a party with the great Socrates. Hey, he's in our team. Let's see where he takes us next. Fun, fun, fun.
Wow.